The sun blazed mercilessly over the open savanna. The wind had stilled, the rocks baked in silence, and even the hawks circling high above seemed to hang motionless in the pale sky, as if the world itself had forgotten to breathe. It was in this stillness that Karak, an elder hunter, and his son Tumba pressed themselves low against the warm face of a sandstone ridge and waited. Karak was 50 years old, though the years meant little to him compared to the miles. His back was hardened by decades of crouching, his feet like leather worn into the shape of the earth, his face a map of every dry season he had survived. Tumba was 16, lean, long-legged, restless in the way that young men always are when they stand at the edge of something important. He had passed his hunter ceremony only weeks ago, but this was his first time hunting something truly large. His hands trembled faintly. He hoped his father would not notice. "Be still," said Karak without moving his lips. "One wrong motion is enough. An ostrich can hear your heartbeat from 100 paces." Tumba stopped breathing altogether. He wasn't sure if he was doing it right, but he didn't dare ask. He simply stared forward, out across the wide, flat plain that stretched before them like a golden sea. And there, perhaps 150 steps away, 3 ostriches grazed without a care in the world. 2 of them were females, gray, tall, moving with slow, deliberate grace. The third was the male. He was something else entirely. His neck blazed red in the heat, his great wings opened and closed like slow fans, and every few moments he turned his head and swept the horizon with black, sharp eyes that missed almost nothing. Karak had spent 15 years learning to avoid those eyes. The ostrich is a creature unlike any other. It cannot fly, but it runs, and no man alive can outrun it on open ground. A single kick from its enormous foot can break a man's ribs or lift him clean off the earth. Its voice, when raised, rolls across the plain like distant thunder. It is not afraid of much. But it can be fooled. That was what Karak had learned, slowly, through failure and patience and observation. Not every animal could be chased down. Not every animal should be. The ostrich was one of those creatures that rewarded cleverness over speed, stillness over aggression, understanding over brute force. "Do you remember what I told you?" Karak murmured. Tumba nodded. "You cannot approach an ostrich directly," he whispered, reciting it as he had been taught. "It will run, but—" "But?" said Karak, in the tone of a man who already knows the answer. "But an ostrich can be deceived. It will accept a false thing as real if you give it reason to." "Exactly." Karak reached behind him and produced a long, thin pole. At its tip was a sculpted ostrich head and neck, made by his own hands over 3 evenings, covered carefully with real ostrich feathers, dried and shaped, until it looked from any distance beyond 30 steps entirely convincing. In the low, angled light of afternoon, it could fool even a careful eye. "I will move toward them," Karak said quietly, "slowly. There is no hurry. You will circle left, all the way to that cluster of thorn bush, and you will get low and stay low. When you are in position, raise your hand once. Then I begin." Tumba nodded, but there was a question on his face, one he had been holding for days. "Father," he started. "Ask it." "People say the ostrich buries its head in the sand when it is frightened. Is that true?" Karak was quiet for a moment. "No, it is not true. Sometimes the ostrich lies flat on the ground when it is warming its eggs or when it is trying not to be seen from far away. But burying its head? No, that is a story people tell because it sounds good. The ostrich does not hide. It runs, or it fights. That is why the only way to hunt it is to think before it does." Half an hour passed in silence. Tumba worked his way carefully around the edge of the plain, moving between rocks and scrub with the patience Karak had drilled in him since childhood. every step placed with thought, every pause timed to when the male turned his gaze away. It took a long time. Finally, Toomba reached the thorn bush. He settled low into the dry grass, his chin almost touching the earth. He raised one hand. Karak began. What happened next was something that Toomba would try to describe to his own children one day, and always feel he had not quite captured it. His father, a grown man, a large man, a man with gray at his temples and a scar on his left arm forearm from a lion encounter long ago, disappeared. Not literally, but almost. Karak pressed himself low to the earth, raised the pole with the sculpted ostrich head in front of him, and began to move. From any distance, it looked like a solitary ostrich moving slowly across the plain. The neck bobbed gently as Karak crawled. The feathers caught the breeze. The angle of it was exactly right. Toomba understood now why his father had spent 3 evenings making it. The male ostrich saw the approaching shape and stopped. He raised his head high, that blazing red neck stretching upward, and stared. Toomba's stomach dropped. He was certain the animal would run. But it did not. After a long moment, the male lowered his head slightly. He shifted his weight. He watched a little longer, then turned back to grazing. In the language of ostriches, or at least in Karak's understanding of it, this meant, "You are not a threat. You may be one of us." Karak kept moving. 120 steps. 100. 70. 50. At 50 steps, Karak paused. He slowly, carefully reached to his side and drew out what he had carried there all morning, a long, thin cord of braided cob, strong and light, with a loose loop tied at one end. He had made the cord himself from plant fibers and animal sinew, worked together over many nights until it held the strength he needed. He laid the loop flat on the ground. He shaped it into a wide, patient circle in the dry grass, almost invisible once settled. Into the center of the circle, he scattered a small handful of seeds and dried berries, things an ostrich would walk toward without thinking. Then Karak flattened himself completely. He became part of the earth. He waited. It was the younger female that noticed the seeds first. She raised her head, turned, and regarded the small scattering of food with the particular expression ostriches have, which is to say, a look of absolute blankness that somehow also conveys curiosity. She walked into the circle, stopped, looked around. The plain was quiet. The strange ostrich-shaped thing had stopped moving entirely. She walked into the circle. Toomba pressed his forehead on the ground. He could not look. Then he could not stop looking. The female bent her long neck and began to feed. Karak pulled the cord. The loop tightened around her ankle in an instant. She lurched forward with a burst of raw power that dragged the cord through Karak's hands and kicked up a cloud of dust. She screamed, a deep, booming sound that rolled out across the plain and sent the other 2 ostriches sprinting away in an explosion of gray feathers and thundering feet. The male ostrich paused at the edge of the plain, turned, stared. Then he too was gone. The captured female pulled and circled and fought the cord with everything she had. Karak held on, keeping his distance. The animal's feet were dangerous, and he knew it, letting her expend herself, speaking to her in a low, continuous murmur that was not quite words, not quite a song, but something in between, something meant to reach past the fear. She fought for a long time. Then she tired. Then she stood still, sides heaving, watching Karak with one enormous dark eye. Toomba ran across the plain and arrived breathless to find his father sitting calmly on a low rock, drinking from a gourd, the ostrich standing quietly a few lengths away, the cord looped around a heavy stone. "Are we not going to kill her?" Toomba asked, looking between his father and the bird. "Not today," Karak said. "Then what?" "Today she learned that she cannot simply run. She tested the cord and found that it does not break. That is enough for today. He paused, watching the animal. If I cut her free now, she runs. She tells the others with her body and her voice that this place is dangerous. We never see her again. Toomba was quiet for a moment. And if you don't cut her free? Then tomorrow I come back. I bring more seeds. I sit nearby, and I do not move quickly, and I do not shout. And the day after that, I do the same. Karak looked at his son. Animals are like people, Toomba. What they cannot escape, they eventually accept. What they accept, they eventually stop fearing. And what they stop fearing, they come to trust if you give them reason to. The sun was beginning its descent. Long shadows stretched across the plain. My father taught me this, Karak said, and his father taught him. It is not written anywhere. It lives only in the doing.